Good morning, everyone. I am Alicia Thomas, the Executive Director of the Virginia Quilt Museum, and I am here today for office hours for Stitching Together History, 250 Quilts Commemorating the Commonwealth of Virginia. And today I'm going to take you through the Encyclopedia Virginia. This is a really great resource if you're looking for a topic for your quilt. So Encyclopedia Virginia is produced and hosted by Virginia Humanities. Virginia Humanities is also another great resource. So Encyclopedia Virginia, you can find at encyclopediavirginia.org. And this, I'm just going to take you through some of the things you can find on here and give you some suggestions of how to look for topics for your quilt and what to consider when you're looking for a topic. So you can see, excuse me, allergies are already kicking in this year. It's delightful. So you can see here on Encyclopedia Virginia, there's a lot of different ways you can find information. You can just go to the recent entries and see what they've been posting new. You can look up primary documents. For those of you who maybe don't have a background in history, which is probably most people, primary documents are documents that were written at the time of the event. So if we're talking something that happened in 1841, a primary document was written in 1841, most likely by someone who saw or witnessed the event. It gets a little bit trickier when you're talking about memoirs or things that were written later. Those can be a little bit harder to call primary documents because our memories are not really great as humans. We tend to forget things or just misremember things. So when you're talking about things that were written sometimes at the end of people's lives, or even just 10 to 15 years after an event happened, they cannot be the greatest actual records. They're still good and you should still by all means look at them, but those you would want to compare to other actual primary documents. You can also, just see different things that they have coming up. You can see what from Encyclopedia Virginia has been mentioned in the media. Cardinal News is doing a really great project for the 250th where they are focusing a lot on the 250th. So if you're looking for a topic, I also recommend checking out Cardinal News. They also got a grant from the VA 250th Commission for their project, much like we did here for Stitching Together History. So they're doing really fun things. There's a fun on this day section, so you can look at those. History A to Z. Categories is really great if you know there's a specific category or topic that interests you, but you haven't narrowed it down to one specific event or person. I would recommend starting in the category section. And then there's also a random entry. So that changes every day. But then also up here at the top, you can look alphabetically. You can look for biographies. So if you want to do a person, this is a really great place to start. And then they have a map. So it'll bring up a map of the state of Virginia or the Commonwealth, sorry. Media and virtual tours. I wanted to start by looking at the map. You can either choose to let it allow your know your location or block it. I'm going to say block right now, mainly because I am recording this while I am out of town for the weekend, so I'm not in Virginia, so it was going to mess up the map if I said allow. If you're in Virginia, go ahead and say allow, or don't, and it's going to center you around Charlottesville. So you can see once it comes to the map, there are these little red dots that you can click on, and it's going to bring up a little bit more. One of the things I really like is it's going to tell you the date of the event right here in this little blurb. So if you know you want to do something from the 1700s, this would not be a choice for you because it happened in 1898. And so then there's just all of these different things you can look for. So if you live in Virginia or want to do something focused on a specific place in Virginia, the map is a really fun way to do that. You can scroll out. One of the things is up here in the right-hand corner, there's set location and there's reset zoom. So if you reset zoom, it's going to go to its default. If you do set location, you can then drop a point, and that's going to bring up whatever's in that region. So I actually want to take us over to the Eastern Shore. I know some people have reached out and said, hey, your logo for Stitching Together History doesn't include the Eastern Shore. And I know, I'm sorry, our logo also doesn't include West Virginia, and you could include West Virginia history in this. It was really just a stylistic choice to make our logo look good. So sorry, Eastern Shore, we're not ignoring you. It was just to make things pretty and easy. So I was poking around on here the other day, and I found a really fascinating woman that I wanted to share with you guys. So we're going to try and find her again. I, of course, didn't actually write down her name, so we're just going to poke around until I find it. Also, just really quickly mentioning Tangier Island is a whole fascinating place. So please, someone make a quilt about that and its history and everything that has happened on that island and is continuing to happen with rising sea levels. It's a fascinating place out there. And now I'm not finding what I was looking for the other day. Sorry, guys, I really should have written down the name of this woman that I found so fascinating. She was born in the mid 1700s, or actually maybe even earlier. It may be Jane Webb. Let's go look more at Jane Webb. Yes, I found it. Yay, Jane Webb. Born circa 1682, died in 1764. So before we were even a country, before Virginia was a Commonwealth. But her story is fascinating. So you can see here, this is the entry. I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but one of the things I really like about Encyclopedia Virginia is up here, it does just give you a really quick summary. So Jane Webb was a free mixed race woman who was born in colonial Virginia. She married an enslaved man. And when they got married, she actually drew up a contract with her husband's owner and to guarantee her freedom and also the freedom of her children. The owner did not comply by that contract, and she ended up suing him. And it's a really fascinating story about how the rights women had, the rights women of color had in colonial Virginia, how they used the legal system to help protect the rights, how sometimes the legal system failed them and their children. And it's this story is so fascinating. Please, someone make a quilt about Jane Webb. There's just so much in here that is really, really fascinating. It's just an incredible story that needs to be told more. So someone make a quilt about it and help tell that story. And you can see down here, it goes into more records, some pictures. This is the Northampton County Courthouse. Some legal documents, illustrations. One of the partitions relating to her children. One of the really fascinating things I found about this story is that because Jane was a free woman and her husband was enslaved, she was legally the head of the household because as her husband was enslaved, he didn't have any legal rights, so he could not be the head of the household, which is why she could own property and why she could sue in the courts, is because she was the head of the household. So just so many fascinating things wrapped up all in this one woman's life. So that was one of the fun things I wanted to show you from the map. You can also then see down here, it's tagged with the categories and the type of entry it is. So this is a biography. It's colonial history. So if you're interested in colonial history, again, you can just come to categories. If you're here on the home page, you can come down to categories. And let's just take a look at all of the categories. And like you can see, like you saw in Jane's entry, things are generally going to be tagged with more than one category. So something can be African American history, antebellum. It could be arts and culture as well. All different sorts of things. So the civil rights movement, the Civil War, colleges and universities. Ooh, crimes and criminals. Let's take a look at that. Everyone finds criminals fascinating, right? When you first click into a category, it's going to show you everything. So it's going to show you primary documents, entries, all of that. So let's narrow this down and just look at biographies of crimes and criminals. So let's look at John A.G. Davis. What did he do? Oh, that picked a really bleak one. He was a law professor at the University of Virginia, and he was murdered by a student. That is not a great story, but it happens. So that's one of the ways you can find entries. If we go back to categories, you can find things like folk life, the French and Indian War, which everyone tends to forget about. So let's take a look at that. And there's only one entry. So let's look at Robert Munford. So he was apparently a playwright, but also involved in the military. He served before, during, and after the American Revolution. Was active in government here in Virginia. He wrote 2 plays, a few poems. He served under George Washington. And one of the really great things that Virginia Humanities does is they do have all these links throughout the articles. So you can, if you're reading something and you can, go down a little rabbit hole and get sidetracked, and who knows where you'll end up. So let's take a look at performing arts, actually. And let's look for entries about performing arts. Dancing during the colonial period sounds fun and a little bit more lighthearted than the last few entries we've looked at. So this is just a fun entry that is going to take you through dancing during the colonial period. And it's nice here they break it down by theatrical dancing, the functions of dance, the French influence. Let's look at this timeline. So May 1607, the English colonists arrive in Virginia, bringing musical instruments with them. So that's one of the things that maybe we don't think about all the time, is that when even the earliest settlers were arriving from Europe, they were bringing instruments. They weren't just bringing the absolute necessities with them. 1651, John Playford publishes the first edition of the English Dancing Master, the most famous and widely distributed collection of country dances. It will run to 18 editions. That is amazing. Spring of 1699, the capital of Virginia is moved from Jamestown to Williamsburg, and the construction of the College of William and Mary has recently been completed, and the college building has a suitable hall for dancing, and other buildings are being planned to accommodate the activity. I really love just thinking about the founding fathers dancing. It makes them seem a little bit more human. So these are just some ideas of different things you can look at and find different topics for. A perfectly great quilt would be about dancing in the colonial times and talking about why it was important and how it was important to society and what it meant to people. So we can also take a look at some of the virtual tours they offer. So these are virtual tours of different sites around the Commonwealth. So you can see there's one of Montpelier, there's one of the Robert Russo Moton Museum, which that webinar that we are doing focusing on the Moton story and civil rights and education has been rescheduled for March 14th at 7 p.m. It will be recorded and shared on our YouTube channel. So please join in for that. It's going to be really great. Can do a virtual tour of Poplar Forest, a virtual tour of the Virginia State Capitol. I have to say, if you are in Richmond, please go do a tour of the Capitol. They are free. I just did one about a month ago, and it was really delightful. I went on a Saturday with a group of friends. I believe tours start on the hour. If you just Google Virginia State Capitol tours, you'll find their website and information on it. There were probably 20 of us on the tour. The tour guide was delightful. It was probably a little bit more than an hour. We got to go into the old Senate chamber and the old House chamber. We actually got to go on the floor of the current House. They weren't in session, so since it was a Saturday, we were able to actually go in and see the House chamber on the floor. That was really fun. Our tour guide was fantastic. He answered all of our questions. And then after the tour, we were actually able to just wander around on our own, which was really nice. There's also on the Capitol grounds, there are a lot of monuments. There's the Women's Monument, which is really fascinating. It has, I think, 11 statues of influential women in Virginia's history. So if you're looking to do a quilt focused on a woman in Virginia and are having trouble finding a topic, maybe look there. There are some well-known women in that monument, but also some that aren't as well known. So I just really, if you happen to be in Richmond and have a spare hour or two, I recommend the Capitol tour. It was really informative. It was a good time. One of the really fascinating things was the story about a collapse at the Capitol that horrifyingly killed like 62 people and injured 250 other people in 1870. It's a rough story. There was a structural failure in the Capitol building in a room that had been added on. The building collapsed when there were hundreds of people in it waiting for a court decision. Like I said, 62 people were killed, 250 others were injured. But it's a fascinating story that involves a lot of things. It ties up Reconstruction, politics, architecture, and why you maybe shouldn't remove columns from the inside of a building if they're supporting a room above them. So a lot of different angles that you could take there. So that's my plug for the Virginia State Capitol tour. They also have a nice exhibit in their visitor center about the 250th. So that is a fun thing that you can go look at. But for right now, let's take a look at one of these virtual tours and see what they are like. Let's do the Poe Museum. So as some of you may know, Edgar Allan Poe lived in Virginia. So that is why there is a Poe Museum. And you can see here, this is probably pretty small. I'm not sure that I can make it. Well, I can zoom in on things. But you can poke around the Poe Museum. And let's take a look at another one. Let's look at the dwelling for the enslaved at Walnut Valley Plantation. So this is one of the oldest extant slave quarters in Virginia. So you can see what it was like. This building, the inside measures 14 by 16 feet, so that's not super big. It's in Surrey County near Highgate. And so these virtual tours are great if you are thinking maybe you want to do a quilt about an enslaved dwelling, but you can't drive out to Surrey County. This is a really great way to explore it and get some of the details that you might need for your quilt without having to drive to Surrey County. So another way we can look up things is just alphabetically. So here I happen to be in the V's. So you can see the Vagrancy Act of 1866, all different sorts of things. The Virginia State Song. Let's look at that. So Carry Me Back to Old Virginia was the official state song of Virginia from 1940 to 1997. So now I'm wondering, what is our current state song? And one of the places where we can find what our current state song most likely is up here in Virginia Facts. And this is really just what it says it is. It is all the facts about Virginia. So we became a state in 1788. Our capital is Richmond. Estimated population of 2019 is just over 8.5 million. Our size. State bird is a cardinal. State flower is the American dogwood. State tree is also the American dogwood. State dog is the American foxhound. I love that. Gonna say I wouldn't be mad if there was a foxhound. Quilt. And you know what? This just made a liar out of me. It doesn't actually tell us the state song. So we'll have to continue to explore and see if we can find that. Let's take a quick look at biographies. Again, these are alphabetical. So if you know the person you're looking for, their last name starts with an H, you can just go right in here. Patrick Henry, Sally Hemings, all sorts of folks. William Henry Harrison. Let's look at Mrs. Burton Harrison, 1843 to 1920. Mrs. Burton Harrison, also known as Constant Carey Harrison, was a prolific American novelist late in the 19th century who came from a prominent Virginia family. So she lived through the Civil War. She nursed the Confederate wounded at Manassas and in Richmond. She toured Europe after the war and eventually married and settled down in New York City. And she was an active elite in New York society. Much of what she wrote was popular serialized fiction and romance. She authored more than 50 works. That is a lot of writing. That included short stories, articles, and essays. She seems like a person that would be interesting to delve into a little bit more. You can see she clearly supported the Confederacy. Here's a list of her major works. So if you maybe wanted to read one of those and be inspired by that. Yeah. So there are just all sorts of different ways that you can find information here. You can also just search. So if you know you wanted to do something, maybe about oystering. Oystering has been hugely influential in Virginia. It's still hugely influential. There's still a lot of politics around oystering. There's a lot of to do with the environmental movement around it. So it's a topic that would be well worth representing in a quilt. So here you can also, it looks like it's brought up some things maybe not related to oystering. So let's try just searching oyster. There we go. So let's look at Joseph A. Bristow, who it says here, he made himself an expert on oysters. So let's see more about that because that's fascinating. He was a Confederate veteran, developed an interest in oyster harvesting, and took out a patent for deep water tongs with an associate. Bristow's resolution that a naturally occurring oyster beds be held as a public trust did evolve into a section of the new Constitution. So he was part of the Virginia Constitutional Convention of 1901, 1902, when Virginia was rewriting their constitution. So let's just see if we can find out more about his oyster work. That's a fantastic portrait. Great beard there, sir. So at the Constitutional Convention, he introduced resolutions intended to protect private oyster beds and to enable watermen and farmers to sell their catches and produce free from local licensing ordinances and discriminatory freight rates. His resolution that naturally occurring oyster beds should be held as a public trust for the use of the people of Virginia evolved into Section 175 of the Constitution of 1902. So one of the things is sometimes the Encyclopedia Virginia does not go into a lot of details on these things. So if you wanted to know more about Section 175 of the Constitution of 1902, you could then go to your local library and do some research on that and talk to a librarian about it and find out more and see if it's something that you really wanted to explore more and make a quilt about. So I'm going to go back to the map again. And we looked out at the eastern shore, but now let's maybe take a look down at Southwest Virginia. So let's look and see what's happening down near Floyd. So we've got Ruby Altzer Roberts is born. Over here, the U.S. Court of Appeals holds there are manifest inequalities among Pulaski's schools. That's November 1950. So that's going to have to do with civil rights and separate but equal. A wooden bridge is destroyed over the New River. This is May 10th, 1864, so Civil War. Lewis Miller dies in Christiansburg, 1882. All sorts of different things. J. Sargent Reynolds is buried. That's 1971. 6 white men are convicted of second-degree murder in Patrick County for lynching another white man. It is interesting that they lynched another white man. Lynching was almost always lynching African Americans or other minorities. So I'm not sure what's happening there. December 5th, 1821, George William Booker is born in Patrick County, the son of Edward Booker and Elizabeth Anglin Booker. So these are just different ways that you can find more information and find a topic for your quilt. So go back to the Encyclopedia Virginia homepage again. Just looking to see if there's anything else I wanted to show you. Recent media, you can click on the pictures and see what the media item is. And you can see that this is from the Jamestown Yorktown Foundation, and that's going to take us over to their webpage so you can learn more about them there. You can go to the Battle of Great Bridge. It was fought the morning of December 9th, 1775, and was the first major battle of the American Revolution in Virginia. I knew nothing about this. This is just complete happenstance that I happened to click on this. It was a significant victory for early Patriot military mobilization. That's great. So I'll be the first to admit that revolutionary history is not my strong suit. Virginia history is not my strong suit. I did not grow up in Virginia. I grew up in Michigan, so I'm much more familiar with Michigan and Midwestern history than I am with Virginia. So that's been one of the really fun things about this project for me so far, as I've been learning as I go along. So this is a really good entry about that battle. It's a nice drawing of a fort. Just all sorts of different information that you can find on Encyclopedia Virginia. So if you're looking for a topic, I highly recommend maybe starting here. Again, it might not provide all the information you have, but then you can take the information you do find and go to your local library or your local historical society or museum and get some help doing some research. Don't be afraid to reach out to librarians or museums or historical societies. We all exist to help the public, and it's something everyone I know that works in one of those institutions would love to get a question like this and would find the time to help you, or at the very least point you in the right direction of who can help you. So I think that is a pretty good look at what all you can find on the Encyclopedia Virginia and how you can find some different information. So I hope that has been helpful. I hope that it gives you some ideas of how you can find information and where you can find some information. Next month, I will share some different resources. I haven't quite decided what yet. It kind of depends on what mood I'm in and what I feel like looking at that day. But if you have any questions, you are feel free to reach out to me at director@vaquiltmuseum.org. You can find my contact information on our website, vaquiltmuseum.org. The call for entries is open. There is another recording up on our YouTube channel that walks you through how to apply for the call for entries. You apply on callforentry.org. You have until September 30th to submit your quilts. We require 2 photographs, one of the entire quilt and one of a detail of the quilt. And then there's a handful of questions. So I recommend that you watch that video. It's short. I think it's about half an hour. It's just me walking you through it. Call for entries is really easy to use. They also have really good help resources. I'm also happy to answer questions. I know everyone's going to submit their quilts in September. That is perfectly fine. Please do not wait until September 30th to start your application. You never know when you'll have technical problems. Your internet could go out. You could just have problems uploading things. If you watch that video, one of the things you'll see is that 2 of the photos I tried to upload were not the right size. So they're just things like that that you want to give yourself plenty of time to address. So please start your application a couple of days before September 30th at the very latest. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. I will answer you as soon as I can. And I have office hours once a month, so you can also just pop into those office hours and ask questions. And I'm working to schedule some trips around the state to 2 different quilt shops. So those will most likely be on Saturdays. I just got to figure out when I have some free Saturdays. So I'm hoping to do one in the Richmond area, one in Northern Virginia, and then one down in Southwest Virginia. So I will, once we have those scheduled, we will publicize them widely, and that will be a great way that you can come ask questions in person as well. I'll also probably do a couple of days at the museum where you can come ask questions as well if you're in the Harrisonburg area. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this has been helpful. If you have questions or comments, again, my email is director@vaquiltmuseum.org. And I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you so much.